Hello and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about perceptions of tarot. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. All right, so for our main discussion today, we're going to be talking about perceptions of tarot that are out there. And these are probably things you've heard before, maybe they're things you've even thought before. So let's kind of break it down and talk about some of these things. I would say the first perceptions that sort of come to mind, I'm going to do a whole episode on like perceptions or descriptions in pop culture of tarot next. So I'm going to keep it sort of general for this one, but I would say like the first perceptions I think of are sort of like evil, witchcraft, which I think like it can be considered witchcraft. But I would say sort of the perception is maybe that like, oh, it's this like devil thing, like it's not okay. Again, I would say this is sort of maybe like a religious or Christian like lens on tarot or even like on magic, that it is somehow like different or separate from um, the quote unquote good like of a religion, and that it's not okay. I definitely grew up in the era of Harry Potter and the Harry Potter books as a kid, and they used to get banned a lot, probably still do in schools, of sort of this like, oh, it's witchcraft and wizardry, and that's not okay for the children. Um, so that's sort of one of the things that I think comes up, and it's not really something I've had anyone sort of engage with me directly, but I have had people sort of like ask me, like, oh, does anyone ever say that? Or like, do you ever worry about putting maybe like in my bio or doing a podcast on tarot or being called like being calling myself a witch or anything like that? And honestly, no, I don't really. Again, I sort of own it for myself. It took me a while to get to the place where I feel fine calling myself a witch, and I'm not really worried about what other people think about that. But I think those ideas are definitely out there. Um, I would say another perception is that tarot tells the future, and I'd say usually this is sort of perceived like in an ominous way. Again, I'm going to get into sort of pop culture like descriptions of tarot in the next episode specifically, but I would say like often when tarot is talked about as sort of this like general thing, people that maybe are against it or scared of it or worried about it, or even how it comes out in the media or in movies and stuff, is like, oh, it's gonna like, right, you're gonna get like the death card or the devil, right? Certain cards are seen as bad, like the tower as well. And that means like you're gonna die and or character is gonna die in a movie, and sort of like prescribing that this is gonna happen. And so I would say again, like I think tarot can be used as a way to perhaps tell the future or tell a version of what could happen in the future, or sort of the divination, like divining side of it. But I think often when it's talked about in this way, it's seen as like this is true and there's nothing you can do about it. Or sort of again that like it's true and like it's ominous. Um, I think another perception of tarot is sort of, I would say what often, or yeah, what often gets said about things that maybe women are more interested in or that are more intuitive or sort of like gender coded in that way is that like, oh, it's not real, or like you should be skeptical of it. I even saw a thing when I was doing a little preliminary research online of like, do you believe in it? Which I think is very interesting because I'm like, well, if you don't believe in tarot, then like don't use it. Seems very easy to me. But yeah, I would say that's a sort of another perception, is just this sort of like, oh, let's have a debate about is it real or not, which I think goes back to the telling the future part of it, right? Like, okay, if it is real and it tells the future, like, oh, maybe that's a reason to be scared of it. Um, but if it tells the future and it's not real, or like if that's a scary thing, or again, like it's a thing you don't have control over, or that this is just how it's going to be and that's how you have to deal with it, and you don't have any choice or any free will in the matter, I think it, right, some people might lend towards the like, oh, I'm skeptical of it because that thing didn't come true, or right, it said I was going to get this job and I didn't, or again, like it said I should break up with my boyfriend and I did, and now I have regrets, or like just sort of like different things like that, of sort of this like doubt or skepticism about it, which again, I think like it's fine if you feel that way, but I'm not sure why like that needs to affect how I feel about tarot, or what it does for me, or what I like about it, or what I think can be helpful for other people. So another perception I see out there are that only certain people, sorry, that only certain people can read it, and then you have to pay or go to a tarot reader to get like a real reading. Um, and yeah, I don't think that's true at all. Again, like the name of my podcast is Everyday Tarot. I really talk about that. I think anyone can utilize the tarot, especially if they want to, or if they're interested or tarot curious, as I might say. And I think also, again, this kind of goes back to that, like telling the future, of sort of that, like, oh, only certain people can like read tarot and are intuitive in this way, or like are connected to the universe or the divine, or however you think sort of the answers are coming down in the tarot cards, that only certain people can read it. So that's not really a thing that I believe or sort of take hold of. Again, like I think you do have to believe in tarot to some extent in order to maybe get benefit out of it, or um, to find it helpful, or like to practice with it. But I think you can be skeptical going into it, have a deck or get a reading, and then perhaps even still be skeptical and maybe change your mind down the road, depending on how things work out for you. Yeah, I think so. I talked about sort of that certain cards are bad. I would say there's definitely that perception out there, right? Again, I would say like the devil card, death, the tower, are sort of all seen as like ominous. Uh, and that I would say again that that's like the perception of it. I don't really think that those cards are bad or evil, or like they always mean something terrible is going to happen. I think a lot of those cards get sort of misinterpreted, or they get sort of the larger label of like everything that everyone knows about the devil and what that might mean kind of put on it. But I think there are definitely ways to read every card as like a quote unquote good card, or just something that maybe you're struggling with, or like something that, yeah, maybe like things are tumultuous right now, or right, maybe you're going through something that is going to be a transformation cycle. Like, I think a lot of those quote unquote bad cards show up with some intensity, and that can be scary. But again, I feel like those cards in particular get sort of pulled out. And again, I'll talk about it a little more in the pop culture episode, because I feel like, again, those cards in pop culture show up a lot. And again, are sort of always seen as like a literal death omen, or like a literal devil, which is interesting to say the least. Other perceptions of tarot out there, I would say, are that like religious people, if you're religious, like you're against it. Again, sort of going back to this, like, oh, it's evil, or like it's witchcraft, or like it's separate or somehow against the things that a religion, or maybe even Christianity, like believe in or are teaching. Like, I don't really think that's true at all. Again, like I think you can be spiritual or religious and use tarot. Like perhaps you might not find it the same like engaging sort of tool, or perhaps it's not your only tool that you use. Um, but I would say like this is another one that comes up, or I've had people sort of like ask like, oh, like does so and so get mad that you read tarot because like they're religious and they think that this is a bad thing? And I would say like, no, I've never really had anyone like specifically engage me directly about that. I guess we'll see with having a public podcast about tarot if like I get any of that. Um, but most of the people that are interested in a podcast about tarot or sort of like are in my realm or circle or show up in my Instagram feed have some level of interest in sort of some of the things that I do. So I don't think that like it has to be like either you're religious or like you're super pagan and into tarot. Like I don't think it has to be like a divisive thing necessarily. Um, Other perceptions, I sort of talked about this one already, but that like whatever you pull is set in stone. So sort of this idea that like, oh, like it's telling the future, right? Like you pull a card and now like that's definitely going to happen. Or again, like you pull a tower and like you're going to fall off a literal tower, right? Like there is this sort of idea, I would say, or perception of tarot that like, uh, that it is telling the future in a very specific way, and that again, there's sort of this fear that like there's nothing you can do about it or change it, or that it's an omen, or that it, right, like again, that you don't have free will. So I would say that's another one that comes up. That again, like I think the way I view tarot is again sort of this like mirror of like how you might already feel, or sort of like your intuition, or things that might already be aware of, and then it's sort of reflecting back to you like in symbols, in a visual way, in the message, what you might need to hear right now. I don't necessarily think it's like this is how it is. Although like I have different tarot decks, and I would say they all sort of show up differently. So even if I pull the Tower card in one deck, it might feel more strongly or a sort of different message than in another deck. I think the Tower in my Anima Mundi tarot deck by Megan Weiler Wenden is Mount St. Helens. So again, like as someone that lives in Washington State in the Pacific Northwest with people that went through the explosion of Mount St. Helens in the 80s, like right, like that is a scary tower moment. Um, and I get like why like some of these cards get interpreted as very ominous or scary. And I think it's like a really cool, natural, like again, way to depict a tarot card that traditionally was depicted as like a literal tower, very biblical, then like people falling off of it, like catastrophe. That sort of where I live, that like right Mount St. Helens is this like natural feature that did transform and explode and erupt, and it really changed, like it transformed the landscape, right? It transformed people's lives. It transformed the atmosphere for a bit. There was ash falling all over the world. So sometimes those like tower moments, right, have a large impact, but I don't think that that means that it's necessarily set in stone. I think another perception is again that there's only one way to interpret the cards. And like I said, sort of, I interpret cards differently when they're in different decks, or even like when I pull them for different people or myself. Like if there's a card that again has like a, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but in the Anima Mundi deck, a lot of the cards are animals, so there might be like a crow that, for example, is one of the cards or one of the things depicted. Well, if I read that for someone else, they might have a very different perception of crows, or they might feed crows and they love them and they interact with them daily. And so that's going to mean something very different to someone that like doesn't have that association with the card or with this animal, the crow. Um, and I think that, yeah, in the same deck, like people can interpret cards differently, or even in different situations. I might pull the same card from the same deck a month apart and have a very different reaction, or have it remind me of a different thing, or feel like it's talking about a different moment in my life. than when I first pulled it. I think the sort of final perceptions of tarot to talk about are, again, this idea that maybe you have to memorize the cards for it to be real, for you to be like a real tarot reader, or that like if you're looking it up in the book, that that's somehow like inferior, or you're not a real reader, or like it's not interpreting the true like message of the card. Um, I don't think you have to memorize the cards. I think you can look in the book. You can ask people. You can Google it. You can have books for reference. I think whatever's helpful for you is helpful, and you never really know where that interpretation that's going to like matter to you is going to come from. And maybe, right, over time, maybe that is part of what you memorize about the cards, and maybe that does come with time, but I don't think you have to memorize the cards to feel like it's a real reading, or to feel like that's the better way to do it, or that, right, that's like necessary, or anything like that, or sort of this idea that like, oh, if I'm interpreting it without sort of the text, that's better. I think it's fine going back to the text. It's sort of like an open book test, um, where you can look at it, right? Like it can be helpful, and it might not be the full picture that you have for the answer. Right? You might still be pulling in things you know from your life, or sort of like your own, again, like animals that you know, or guides, or that you pulled this card yesterday, right? Like you're going to have context that's going to help you think about the cards. And again, I think that can be different from day to day. So while you might be able to or want to memorize, right, the Rider Waite Smith, like interpretation of the cards and the symbols on it, that might be helpful to you. And I think that it's very cool to have different tarot decks. I get to see other people's and just to see how differently they can be interpreted, even when it's the same card on a different day. Um, all right, I'm going to stop there for today. So let's dive in and see what the cards have to say. All right, so today I pulled two cards from my Anima Mundi tarot deck by Megan Lyra-Wendon. And links for that will be in the show notes and on my website. And I'll have images as well. So the first card I pulled is the Ten of Swords reversed. Which is sort of interesting. We were talking about a bird earlier. There is a dove on this card, and as is tradition for the Ten of Swords, actually this is also sort of an ominous card sometimes, or one that people see as a bad card because it's often like a person or something stabbed with 10 different swords, which can seem like the view or like the definition of overkill. So because this one was reversed, I'm going to read that sort of interpretation first. So it says reversed, change, clarity, recovery, and reevaluation. So upright, it says you may have recently experienced a crushing failure, betrayal, or disaster that brings you to your knees. This is sort of that transformation we've talked about. However, you should be mindful of not making yourself into a martyr because of it. This card means you've hit rock bottom. From here on out, there's nowhere else to go but up. So even in this deck, I feel like they're sort of trying to reframe the idea of being stabbed with 10 swords, that like, okay, like it basically can't get any worse. Right. And since this one is reversed, we already sort of have a bit of a spin of a more positive message, but saying like, you're already changing. There's some clarity around that. You're in recovery and you're sort of reevaluating, right? Maybe like, again, you've sort of gone through all this turmoil. And now you're figuring out, okay, like what does it look like next? What do I do with this information? How do I reevaluate? How do I make changes? How do I transform from, again, the image on this card of a bird that's been stabbed with 10 swords into something else? And the second card I pulled is also a 10, which is interesting. And it's the 10 of Pentacles. And this one depicts, I would say, it looks like a wolf. with wolf pups on it too. It's like a adult-looking wolf with 3 pups on it, and then there's 10 pentacles in the image, and it's sort of in a forest. And this one was upright, so I am going to read the upright version. Oh, it says it's a red wolf. It says you've worked hard for a long time, and through all the struggles and setbacks, you finally accomplished your goals. You've now reached a state of contentment. This also means you're able to turn your attention to your family. So that's probably why those wolf pups are there. You are now able to provide for them and do your part to ensure their bright future. So upright, the themes are establishment, wealth, success, inheritance, and family tradition. And yeah, as I sort of talked about for both of these cards, tens, so usually it's like ace through 10, and then page, knight, queen, king is the general order for each minor arcana suit. And tens are usually seen as like completion, that like the ace is sort of the beginning, and then you're going through the different numbers, and when you get to 10, which is the final sort of number before you get to the royal or the face cards, um, in the minor arcana suits, the 10 is sort of that, again, that sort of completion or like end of a cycle. So we sort of have like the 10 of swords as like the end of this maybe tumultuous or cycle or that sort of thing. And then we have the 10 of pentacles here as sort of this um, like pentacles are generally the like earth um, element or sort of associated with that grounding, right? This card is literally like in a forest. And so it's sort of like tangible things. So like working hard for a long time, going through struggles and setbacks, you finally accomplished your goals, you're reaching contentment, I would say in some aspect of like the material world. Um, some of the other suits have to do with other aspects, but pentacles are generally that very grounded, like earth energy. Um, all right, so yeah, that's the 2 cards I pulled for today. And again, that was from the Anima Mundi Tarot deck. All right, so thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast will come out daily, Monday through Friday, for all of 2025. See you soon. Bye bye.